Awesome. Those of you who are watching the recording, we missed you and glad you're here. We were just talking about Costa Rica, and you reminded me of this experience. We went out surfing, and it was one morning we went out before sunrise, and Parker and I were just sitting out there just beyond the break, right off Dominical, and watching the sunrise. And I start seeing all these little things in the water. I'm like, what is going on?
Freak me out.
Yeah.
I'd be like, there's something in the water.
And so we're just sitting on our boards. I'm like, what is this? And I reach over and I grab one, and it was all these baby turtles, little baby sea turtles that were just going out to sea. And so we grabbed one, we set it on our board, and we just sat there and watched it for a little bit, and watching the sunrise and surfing. And oh man, just heaven down there. Oh, it's so good. And the breakfast, the típica breakfast, gallo pinto, so amazing. Oh, so fun to think about all the cool memories. And you guys, that's one of the coolest things about travel, and travel with a family especially, is that it's so formative. And people used to tell us, they're like, why do you travel when your kids are so little, they won't remember it? And I was like, yeah, you're right, some of it they won't remember, but some of it they cannot forget, because it becomes part of what makes them who they are. And so it's, I don't know, I'm 100% convicted that we have to be really, convicted. I have conviction.
Is that how you?
I don't know how you would say that. I'm convicted. Sounds like a criminal. I have conviction that we have to be as intentional and deliberate as we can for our children's experiences. Those of you who want to totally geek out with this can read the works of Glenn Doman. He was a specialist in childhood development, and he had the coolest things, even from when they're little babies, just putting your hands against their feet and letting them push and scoot along the bed, and showing them flashcards of words that they couldn't learn how to read, but you show them all those, and then later on they would just have the word. I mean, he went into all the research of it, but that it's forming it like cold water and hot water and bugs and foods and all the stuff. And we've seen it play out in our children's lives as they got older. The things they each experienced at a different phase of our life plays out in their
essentially it's their brain development, really. Because I've always thought of it as being comparative to just simple things like talking and eating. No parent would ever say, I'm going to wait to talk to my kids till they can understand me, right? Like, you wouldn't do that, because they learn how to talk by you talking to them. And so for us, that's always been travel has been a part of that, and experience has been a part of that, because it's helping them learn about the world, and especially more specifically the broader world, by introducing them to those experiences, just like talking to them. If you want your children to be, and the science on this is clear, that if you want your children to have a better educational foundation, the more books you read to them, the more often you talk to them while they're small, the larger vocabulary they have, the more they understand. And I think it's similar with things like experience and travel, that the more you do that, the more brain develop you're contributing to. Same with food. If you want them to be healthy, you don't wait until they're older to give them healthy food. You start while they're young, while they're small. That's how I've thought about it.
And the way to visualize this is that every new experience creates a new neural connection.
Yeah.
And the more you repeat it, the stronger it gets. And so we can all visualize with our mind, we can all visualize, let's say, a brain that has 1 million neural connections, and you put it next to a brain that has 100 million neural connections. There is an obvious difference, right? And the brain technology is starting to happen where we can see that and visualize it. And you just see it that like one brain's just less developed than the other. And so the idea is for all of us to have as much brain development and personality development as possible, like expose ourselves and our children to as much good things, as many good things as possible, so that the brain is quite literally more developed.
Exactly.
Which is such a cool idea. On a side note with the reading thing, my older sister just celebrated her birthday. And so I've been thinking about her last week. And as I've contemplated my life, you guys know how much Rachel and I love books, and how books have been this guiding, disruptive force in our life, right? And it had made such a big difference. And as I thought about this years ago, I'm like, what, man, I love reading and learning. Just a voracious reader. I still average about a book a week and have for a couple of decades. I'm just constantly learning. And I'm like, where did this come from? And I thought back to my childhood. It came from my older sister reading to us. I don't know if I don't remember. I don't remember my mom ever reading to us. But I vividly,
and your dad wasn't around.
My dad was never read. Stepdads came and went, whatever. And you know, our family life was a struggle. But I vividly remember the feeling, not necessarily the content. I remember the feeling of sitting in my bed with my siblings while my older sister read to us. And she would just read out loud from books she was reading. Right. And so there was like these teenage romance books and stuff. And they were decent, right? They weren't bad. But it was the stories and the suspense and the hero's journey weaved into these stories. And I remember the feeling of as a child. I remember sometimes laughing with her and sometimes crying because the book was so sad. Somebody would die. And we're sitting there as these little kids, you know, 3 or 4 of us, look, why did she have to die? Right. But I remember loving stories. And then my sister moved out shortly after that. And I went through this gap of frustration because I missed stories. And my own reading, I was a very slow reader. I struggled with reading. And I missed stories. So I had stories, had the feeling of it all. And then she left and I'm like, I went through this gap of, I don't like this. So finally, it was the desperation of wanting stories enough that I forced myself to start reading and get into books. And luckily, my uncle had some, you know, adventure books for boys and men. And he's like, I never read this. And he just started passing them along to me. They were Tom Clancy books and they were big, right? And so I was like scared and intimidated by this, but I dove into it and I loved it. And so that lit the fire and I didn't stop. I haven't stopped reading since I was 12. But I was thinking through that and wanted to reemphasize this. Please, please, please read to your children. And where you can, read just slightly above their comprehension level, because it'll constantly be stretching them.
Not too far.
Not too far, yeah. Right? Just slightly above, where they're catching bits and pieces and asking little questions because it will draw them up. And man, it can be so transformative. Oh, love this stuff. Love it. Okay. Quick, I think it's worth a quick report on our trip to Portugal because
yes, we did actually make a podcast about it, which is coming out tomorrow morning.
Yep.
You don't know, I'm telling you.
Okay. Yep. Yay.
I'm announcing it to you too. It's coming out tomorrow morning. Yeah, go ahead.
But it was
we're looking for a place to move, if you didn't know.
And we found it. We're moving to the southern coast of Portugal. It was just heavenly. We did absolutely love it over there. But the reason I wanted to bring it up, again, this extraordinary family life, right? And there was these elements and pieces, and we go through it in the whole podcast in detail. But that trip for us, it was magical, is the word I think that's most fitting. It was just 13 days, just the two of us wandering around a place we'd never been, just experiencing all the wonders that the world has to offer, from cool people and cool places and delicious food and gelato and well, food from all around the world and people from around the world. And oh man, and Emily, you've been to Portugal, right? Yeah, we loved it. So Lagos is going to be our spot. I don't know if you've been down there. It's heavenly. Oh man, we loved Lisbon too, and the coasts around there. It was all so fun. But we both came back feeling that the trip had changed us. And we've had that before with transformative experiences, right? But sometimes you come back and it's hard to articulate, but you're like, I just feel that I'm different. Like I sense there's been a change. And it's a cool thing. And I think we can replicate that and create those kind of experiences. And again, we don't have to wander halfway around the world. You can just be more present, more feeling in the day-to-day, and and let those changes and the feelings like stir. You with me? Who's with me on this? Like we can be more alive in our day to day. Who here has gone through the grind, right? You're just rolling along and every day feels like the next day and you're like, blah, blah, blah. And almost like you become numb. I know I've experienced this. And it's what we've talked about this before, the difference between transactional and transformational. The transactional is just going through the motions of it. Like you do the things, right? You do marriage, it's Groundhog Day, right, Emily? It's like you do it and you go through it again and again. But the most beautiful thing, especially about that movie, The Groundhog Day, is like he can't progress until he changes himself.
Well, I was actually just thinking in some ways it's worse than Groundhog Day, the movie, because the benefit he had is what you just said. He couldn't get past that day until he made it better, until he made himself better. That's actually a good thing.
Right.
Like he hated it, but that was a good thing because for us, we can go day after day after day after day and never make any improvement and still just keep repeating Groundhog Day indefinitely until we die. And then it's too late. Like we've missed our chance.
Then it becomes Groundhog Decade. And you're like, no more of that. So just a friendly reminder for all of us. Let's live while we're alive.
And I think one of the takeaways I came back with was just the idea of simplifying, because I mean, this is a message we've had, but even for us, it's easy to just get caught up in doing more and doing more and doing more and just being so busy. And I just came back thinking, no, I just need to get back to the essentials. Like, what are the things I really care about? And just focus on those. I don't need to worry about everything else. There's going to be a lot of things I say no to, and that's okay. Because ultimately what we're all seeking for is this sense, this feeling of being alive and enjoying life. And if we don't get that, at least part of every day, then like, what's the point? Why are we doing everything that we're doing? If we aren't enjoying truly living and truly being with our family and feeling feelings, then everything else we're doing is in vain. And so my recommitment is to get back to doing the essentials. I'm going to work every day. I'm going to do my routines, but I'm also going to make sure that I stop doing those things so I can just be and I can live and I can just, exist a little more. Instead of be a human being instead of a human doing, right?
Because it's so easy to get lost in our to-do list.
Yeah.
The list of tasks gets so big that we lose ourselves in it.
Mm-hmm.
And it's hard to remember to be present and alive and feeling and enjoy the journey. It's so cliche, but so true, isn't it? We all need to pause and make sure you're enjoying the journey. And I can vividly think back in times where I realized I wasn't enjoying it. When we had a bunch of littles and it just seems like it was all diapers and bedtime fights, I caught myself not enjoying that. I'm like, what am I doing? Like, this is what I dreamed about. I dreamed about tons of little kids in diapers. Like, this is the best. And I needed to remember to enjoy it. And there were times we went out traveling and I'm like, why do we travel? Because we want to have all these great memories. And I remember being so frustrated because I was carrying like 7 suitcases and 3 sleeping kids. And I'm like, I am a pack mule. Breaks. Yeah. And this is what would get me. You're on a road trip. You're literally trying to traverse a continent and you're stopping for a kid every 10 minutes. I got pee. Like, we just were at the stop. I didn't have to go then. Right. And eventually I finally switched and was like, okay, why get upset about that? It's disturbing my peace. It's like, I'm becoming unpleasant myself and unpleasant to be around. I'm like, why? Okay. Little one's got to stop. Part of the journey. Got to stop trying to get where I'm going and enjoy the getting there. It's good stuff to remember. Love all this. Okay. So actually, on that note, before we move on, just so it's not all theoretical, I want to invite all of you to pick one thing that you feel like you maybe need to say no to. One thing you might need to eliminate. Some of you might be really good at this already, and you got it down to the bare minimums. But my suspicion is we've all got a little too much going on. And it could even be just too much stuff, and you need to get rid of something that's taking up space and bandwidth and thought and worry and money. Or it might be something you said yes to and you wish you'd said no to, and you need to get out of it. Or it might be a task that's not bringing you the value you'd hoped. Might even be a client. If you're running your own business, might even be a client that pays too little and causes too much pain. Too little pay, too much pain. Right? It's just so
I think the hard part about this process is very often, I think especially for a group like this, we only have good things we're choosing from. It's not like we're trying to cut out something that we know is obviously bad. So we have to let go of some good things. That's the hard part. Is because you look at it and you're like, all of this is good stuff. Like, how do I choose which one of these good things I let go of?
Mm-hmm.
So
that has been particularly true with my clients who have large families, because they've got kids involved in everything. And so you're going here and going there, and you have so much going on, and it's all good. But then you feel like, man, I don't have a life. I know I've talked to many moms. They're like, I'm just a taxi driver now.
Well, and you especially don't have a life together because everyone's doing their separate things.
Yeah. So good. Okay. We're going to dive in today. We're already diving in. We're already in the deep end of the pool. What are we talking about? But when we were coming back from our trip, and we were talking about just all the things that are going on, maybe you guys caught the email, and Rachel was just
maybe you guys heard about like a war in Ukraine and stuff like that.
But with all the stuff that's happening, we just realized, man, parenting, ultimately it comes back to parenting.
I think I can't remember exactly what we were talking about, but I essentially said something kind of tongue in cheek, but then after I said it, we were like, actually, that's kind of true. I was like, all the problems in the world are caused by poor parenting. I said something like that. Yep. And we sat there for a second and we were like,
whoa. That seems way too bold, but as we chewed on it, we're like, okay,
kind of true.
There's some deep truth here. In fact, let's talk about that. Let's talk through that point one way or the other. Let's just talk around it. I'd love to hear your thoughts. You guys can turn on your microphone here, but let's talk around that idea. Could that be the case that the biggest problems in the world are actually fundamentally, we could follow them back to parenting? And
that has, at least if not caused the problem, definitely contributed to the problem.
Or perhaps even just didn't prevent the problem.
That too. Right. And we were talking about it. I'm not going to say what we talked about yet, but one thing we did come up with, we're like, well, maybe not global warming. But then as I thought about it, I'm like, well, maybe so. Maybe if there were more parents concerned about
the environment and animals and plants and trees,
fewer problems.
Right. Well, okay. So that was one thing. We saw that generationally as we've traveled around the world. You probably have too. Deforestation.
Oh my goodness.
And
yes.
it was just, it's generational. The parents just like, well, no, we've got to chop down all the trees. And so the kids keep doing it. They've been doing it for generations. And eventually this place that the entire country used to be a forest is now just cornfields. And they have problems with erosion, and it's changing everything. You're like, okay, that is a parenting thing.
And well, I was saying, oh my goodness, because yesterday my 11-year-old was talking to me about this because he's been watching all these crash course videos on YouTube, and one of them was talking about the deforestation of the Amazon forest, and he was like, Mom, why are these people just cutting down the trees? And I haven't been to the Amazon forest and I don't know the specific situation, but I have lived in Guatemala and I know what it's like there because they also have a deforestation problem. And it's because the local people need to eat, and the way they cook their food is with fire. So they hike up to the mountain and they cut down some tree, some leña, and they bring it back and they burn it so they can eat that day. So I have empathy for this problem because they don't know any better. And I was telling my son, I'm like, they don't know any different. They don't get to watch YouTube like you. They don't understand that the Amazon forest is the biggest lung of the planet. Like, this is what he was talking about. I'm like, they don't get that because they don't have YouTube. They don't have the internet. They don't have the resources you do. And so they don't understand. So as we talk about this problem, we also have to understand the other side of the coin, is because very often the reason that parents are passing on certain things is because they also don't know what it is they're passing on is actually contributing to more problems in the world. It's a very difficult challenge.
Yeah.
Obviously.
Okay, let's hear your thoughts. How is parenting?
You better re-say the question, rephrase the question again, because now we all forgot. I did at least.
I just want to talk through this and hear your thoughts. How is parenting contributing to the problems in the world?
Well, I can talk about something that's more personal and probably applicable to a lot of people, but the way parents feed their kids, because my parents fed me junk of my whole life and I've struggled with my weight and everything since then. So that's been like a huge problem in my life that could have been avoided if they would have just fed me properly. And now I have to put a lot of energy into figuring out what's going to work for me, how am I going to lose weight, this sort of stuff, which I could be using to do something better, rather than just focusing on what do I eat.
Good example. Like going back to the neural pathways, they created neural loops, and we all do with whatever we feed our kids. It creates that loop that then is deeply established. I mean, it's entrenched. And you're right. It's a much bigger energy requirement to break it and rewire it. And that's an energy that's being used towards that. It could have been put to something else. That's a really great insight.
Mm-hmm.
And it could go even further than that, because then it also fuels consumerism, overeating, industrialization, whatever. Like there's a lot that goes into that as well. So
true. And then the social and cultural food habits of an area, the US in particular, is 70% overweight or obese. 70% of children, youth, and adults in this country, 70%.
Which is directly connected to poor eating habits and the industrialization of junk food and processed food. So yeah, that right there is a perfect example. If parents understood, and again, it goes back to the problem of your parents may not have known better, just like our parents didn't know better. I mean, my dad died from colon cancer because of his very poor diet. So it's not that they were malicious or, intentional with this problem. They didn't know better either. And that's the challenge, is that every generation is doing the best that they can, and yet we're being handed down incomplete or inaccurate information. That's why it's a challenge. We're not claiming we're going to solve the problems of the world right here, but we're going to talk about what they are.
And it has to start with us, which you guys are here. You're in the right place. This is why we're doing this. This is why we have this group, because it starts with us.
It starts with the awareness of what's happening, what's going on.
Great. Let's hear some other thoughts. How is parenting contributing to the problems of the world? Come on, be brave. Turn on your microphones. Share your thoughts. So you're maybe driving down the road and you're like, I can't talk right now because I shouldn't talk and be on Zoom at the same time while I'm driving. I'm trying to set a good example for my kids. Well, you at any point you can jump on the mic or throw it in the chat. But as Rachel and I started to think through these things and start considering all the different examples, it became really obvious that this is a major point of focus for all of us as parents and as people. And ultimately, if you read Rachel's email, ultimately, most children turn out to be like their parents, right? We've talked about this before, that the area you grow up in is still the biggest determining factor of your future. So the socioeconomic conditions you grow up in are still the greatest factor for what socioeconomic place you end up in, because that's your reality.
Said another way, there's research out there proving that most people make the amount of money, how do I word this?
So they earn about the same amount as the five people they spend the most time with, right?
Or
a small
but
group.
the other thing about the zip code, that they also earn about the same amount of money as people in their zip code. So that the thing that determines the amount of money you're going to make the most is the zip code you live in. And you're like, how could my zip code determine how much money I make? And that's because that's the socioeconomic environment that you're immersed in. So you're used to seeing whatever is going on in that zip code. And that determines the neural connections that are created, which then determines the goals you set and then the outcomes you receive.
It establishes your reality in a very real way. And even within a circle, if we create a little subset, right? The people who want to drift to the bottom, they go to the bottom of that group. And the people who want to rise to the top of that group.
A floor and a ceiling. Within that zip code, there's a floor and there's a ceiling.
And so that's where they fluctuate. It's really rare that people go below it or above it, especially. Right? That's your reality. And so we all have to ask ourselves, in what way are we establishing those realities for our family?
Which, back to what we talked about in the beginning with travel and exposure to different experiences and places. I mean, that has certainly been a benefit for our family in traveling, because we've lived in lots of different zip codes, right? And in zip codes all over the world. And so our children have been able to see, and us too, this has been a benefit for us. We've been able to see a wide variety of, well, not just socioeconomic or wealth. Because that plays out in other ways too, like emotions and mindset and attitude, all kinds of things. We've been able to see a huge range, and that's helped us to be more intentional in creating our own floor and ceiling, right?
Because
where we want to be, we're choosing it more intentionally.
It threw off those realities. In fact, so many of us, I hope this will sink in today, so many of us have what's called false ceilings. Somebody, something, a parent, a grandparent, a teacher, an idea, a movie, a song, whatever, something creates this limitation, and we go up to it and we look at it and say, well, that's just the top of what I can do. But it's a false ceiling. It's like the false ceiling you see in commercial buildings, and it's just this thin little piece of styrofoam or something, and you just push it out of the way, and like, whoa, there's so much more space here. And we all need to do that and kind of test the upper limits of what we think is possible for ourselves and for our children. It's so easy to think, well, this is just the way things are. We're pushing against it. And like, that's okay. We'll settle in here, kiddos. And the reality is we can start pushing past those limitations and barriers.
And so as parents, we are the ones that are very often creating those limitations for our children, because we're saying, this is where we operate, right here. We operate in this space. We can't go that high. We can't go lower than this. And so that's what we then pass on. And we all do this often unconsciously. We don't know that we're doing this, but this is what we're passing on to our children. Now, partly we do have to do this. Like, we need some sort of boundaries, or else as human beings, we feel unfounded or unsupported. So there has to be some sort of boundaries in place, but we also need to be aware of what those are in order that we can adjust them if necessary, especially with something like food or money or potential. I know for me, like, I never want to be the one who limits my children's potential. So if they believe that they can do something, I'm not going to say differently, because I want them to believe that, because I don't know what they're capable of achieving. And I don't want to be the one telling them, no, you can't do that, because who knows who they're going to grow up to be. I don't. Only they really know.
So we're going to read this comment here, but I want you to share, how is it that our limitations are being passed on? Let's think of some examples and share those. How is it that limitations are being passed on and perpetuated? How are we establishing these false ceilings? Like, what things are we saying or doing? And I'd love to hear your thoughts on this while we read this comment.
The book, The Coddling of the American Mind.
That's a good one.
I haven't read it yet. Points out how helicopter parenting has resulted in a lot of the current cultural issues we are seeing play out now via safetyism.
Yes.
And again, these were parents doing things with good intentions.
Exactly. Great insight, Amy. Well, and it's, yeah, you're trying to be protective. You're trying to help your children, but the end result of all that help, of too much helping, let's say, is an incapable child. So there's one's very specific example, a child who's incapable because of a parent who does too much with good intention
and provides too much safety.
Wow.
Yeah.
Other thoughts? I have a thought. So something that has been coming up a lot for me, it has to do with mindset. And my mom is a Debbie Downer sometimes. And I catch myself thinking the same way that she would think when I was around her more often. And I'm like, wait a second, why am I thinking this? And my husband will sometimes say to me, stop being Kathy, because that's my mom's name. And I'm like, and I'll say that to him too, because he'll have negative thoughts sometimes. And I'm like, stop being Kathy. You don't want to do that. But yeah, it's interesting, because I'm like, wow, that was so ingrained into my head that I can see how I could easily pass that on. So I'm really trying to iron that out, so I'm not, like, I don't get caught up in the negativity. Like, I can have a negative thought, but then just like, okay, that's that's a thought, and bye. Basically.
Yes, that is a perfect example. I love the way you articulated that. Most children will learn to think like their parents think. They'll process the same way. They'll come to similar conclusions. They'll have thinking habits and patterns just like their parents.
Or they come to the extreme opposite of their parents as a reaction.
Right. Or it's reactive. And so then they go way to the other side, because they're like, I'm not going to be anything like Kathy, for example, right? And so it's the anti-Kathy movement or whatever it is, right? We did that same thing. I'm like, I'm not going to think like my mom. My mom's philosophy is life sucks and then you die. Like, that's her bumper sticker, and she'll probably put it on her gravestone. And I'm like, I'm not going to embrace that one. And so, like, but we can swing too far to the other side, and then we're over here. So that mindset we established is huge. Oh, go ahead.
No, I want you to finish your thought.
So
but
I had a new coaching client session this morning, and he had a huge breakthrough during our session. It just clicked. He's like, it was just dawning on him of like, I have been so resentful my whole adult life. And I just realized it's because my mom is so resentful. He's like, I just recently, she contacted me again and was complaining about how resentful she is about her mom, who's been dead for a long time. And I realized, wait a minute, I picked up a perpetual emotional habit of being resentful from my mother, who's still resentful her entire life. And that was her way of being. And so he had picked it up, and he's like, here I am. He's well into his 40s and a successful businessman. And he's like, he's like, I'm spending my whole adult life being resentful, and he can't not pass that on to his children when it's that chronic. Really big breakthrough today. What were you gonna say?
That's good.
Oh.
I was just gonna say, back to this idea of reacting to the opposite of what our parents do, because I feel that that's something that we did, especially in our early years of marriage. We wanted to be so positive that we couldn't admit there were never negative things. Like there's no negativity. It's just happiness and positive thinking. And we had to come back to, like Emily was saying, that it's not that you can never have a negative thought or feeling. Those exist. That's a part of being in the world. That's a part of living. There are negative things that happen. But the point is what you then do with it, what you decide to do with the negativity that might come up. That's ultimately what matters. And so, yeah, it's finding that balance there. I just wanted to point that out.
Good insight. Okay.
But sorry, one more thing. But it's these ideas, though, even the resentfulness, the negativity, and other things. I was thinking like prejudices.
Well, that's what I was going to ask. If more ideas like that. In
contribute
what other
to
ways are
the
we
problems in the world?
Yeah.
Yeah.
What other ways are we passing on the limitations and problems? That's a big one.
Well, not to throw your family under the bus again, but I remember when we left the United States and we went and lived abroad for several years. I think at least 7 years we were out of the country. And I remember we came back and we'd been living in Latin America mostly. And I think we had lived in Europe. But when we came back, both of us said that we were surprised at how racist people were in some of the comments and jokes and things that they were making. It was shocking to us because we had been, we'd lived in a Muslim country. We lived in Latin countries. We lived in lots of places, and we had become a lot more open-minded and a lot more just accepting, and so it was surprising to things that probably would not have bothered us before seemed insensitive or inappropriate. So that's just one simple idea. We don't always know that we're doing that, especially when we exist in this kind of echo chamber or a bubble, our own zip code. We may not realize that certain ideas we have, certain beliefs or philosophies may be inappropriate or prejudiced or racist or.
Man, it's tricky because you might not even be aware, because when you grow up in it, that's just your reality. And everybody around you is making these comments or these jokes, and you might not be cognizant of it. And then one day you're like, whoa, that's mean. That's rude. That's totally inappropriate. Like, I can't believe I grew up saying that stuff, right? Or you hear your own family members say it and you're like, what? So even down to the joking and the jesting. I know one that came up one time that was really significant was sarcasm and teasing. That some families create this dynamic around sarcasm and teasing, and it's deep, and they assume it's all just play and nobody's taking it seriously and nobody's taking it personal. But when you talk to each individual on a deep level, they're like, yeah, it hurts. My own family's just constantly teasing and tearing us down. We're always constantly tearing each other down. You don't feel good. And it's all in jest, right? But I've seen people really, really mentally, emotionally kind of scarred and injured because of sarcasm and teasing. So that's one thing that gets passed down. And
I mean, that being said, we do plenty of teasing in our family.
It's really light though.
But I think we all know where the limits are. We're too far. We know we're too far is. We don't take things too far in a vein that is actually mean. We like to be playful and keep it light. Thanks to Rachel, through coaching, I've been realizing more things I repeated from my parents, and it's been disturbing. However, I'm glad that I have the opportunity to try and stop the pattern. I think that's where all of us are at, honestly. I think we're all trying to set new patterns. One example has to do with how my parents handled schooling and education with me, but I also know that they felt they were doing things from a place of love. It's really interesting to realize how much good intentions can have harmful effects.
Whoa.
Yeah.
Yes.
That's very true. And even for us, we all have good intentions, and some of them may have harmful effects only because we don't know what we don't know. We're trying to learn, right? We're seeking awareness. But when we don't know what we don't know, then we can do things that can be harmful. And the only solution to that is just to continue growing to become the most capable, aware, enlightened person we can become, right? Because the more we have of that, the more we have not just good intentions, because good intentions is where we start, but ultimately we have to have wisdom. I mean, ultimately that's where we've got to get, because intentions aren't enough. We have to be wise, and wisdom comes only with plenty of knowledge and plenty of experience. So the more experience we can get and the more knowledge we can gain, the more wisdom we're going to have. And wisdom is when we can actually then avoid as many harmful effects as possible.
So where do we go from here? If most children turn out to be like their parents,
and most of the world's problems are
caused by incompetent parenting, you're like, that feels really heavy. And obviously it always starts in our own homes. And then even more pointed than that, it starts with us. So I think one of the best ways to move forward is to ask ourselves sincerely, what is it that we want our children to be or do or have that we currently do not? The reality around that is that children model their parents, and the most effective way to help your children become something is by you becoming that thing.
Well, and I want to add, not just that you have to actually be whatever it is you're trying to be, but that you take that journey, because taking the journey is also modeling for your kids. You don't have to have arrived to wherever that place is. But if you're walking the path, if you're on your way there, that's a part of the modeling journey. You're showing your children how to walk the path of life. And that's critical. That's key.
And what's so cool, and you guys have probably experienced this already, you start down that path and your kids are like, sweet, and they run ahead of you. That's definitely happened with us. You're walking on the right path and they're like, this is great. And they run way ahead of you, which is where you want them to be. You want them to surpass you intellectually and physically, mentally, emotionally, musically, socially. Like, go. Like, this is when you're like cheering, go, run, keep going. And you just get them on the right path. And so what Rachel's saying is super valid and important. Is like, we have to be walking on that path. Where we get into trouble is we want our kids to do something that we blatantly don't even attempt. Or we want our kids to
tell our kids to go down the path.
Go down that path. It's good for you. And they're like, what are you talking about? You're not even moving. Or you, again, this keeps coming up today because it's just been on my mind. It's been so relevant and real. You're passing along your own mental, emotional stuff. Some of your own baggage, so to speak, or your own fixed mindset or limiting thinking, limiting beliefs. And so one of the invitations today is like, examine your own limiting beliefs. Are they a reality, or are they just your reality? Money's an easy one. How many of you here grew up in a family that had a very limited or scarce mindset about money? Both Rachel and I did, man. Whoo-wee. You in our generation kind of heard this, money doesn't grow on trees kind of stuff. I literally heard my parents say that all the time. I'm not made of money. Money doesn't grow on trees. Like, this is a response to everything. It's like there was just so much limitation. And so we had a very scarce mindset and false ceilings about money. But it applies across the board. And so it's so valuable and so beneficial for each of us to look at ourselves and say, where are my limitations being passed on? How's my mode of thinking being passed on? How are my habits being passed on? And are they habits I want my children to acquire? That's a really great question, isn't it? Do I want my kids to be doing what I'm doing? Man, and you look at that and you're like, nope, this stops right here. Because the reality is they're super likely to do it if you don't stop it.
And again, back to this idea, the beautiful thing is it's not like that you have to solve it tomorrow and be this perfect model for them, but you going through this process is beneficial for them to observe. So don't see it as a bad thing, see it as an opportunity. You have an opportunity for your kids to learn something by you learning it. Yep. Yeah, exactly.
Okay, let's hear some more thoughts. We got a quiet group today. Maybe all your microphones aren't working, but that's what we'll say. Benefit of the doubt. There's technical issues. No, just kidding. But let's hear, like, what are the things you would like to focus on? What are the things you'd like to have your kids pick up, acquire?
I just remembered something else I wanted to say.
So
Sorry.
don't you're not getting out of the question. She's going to comment while you're thinking of your answers.
Well, because one of the things I have been thinking about in relation to specifically like big world issues like war in Ukraine, potential World War III, whatever, those types of things. One of the things a couple of the things I've been thinking about is like, what can we actually do? Like, how can we actually help make the world be a better place with situations like this? One of the things I've been thinking about was, there's this lady I follow on Instagram. Her thing is Max Explore. We've never met in person, but we've been like communicating for a long time. But she put a post up on her feed saying, my life is great. People are fleeing from the Ukraine. I feel bad that I, have this great life, and kind of this idea of, wow, what do I do about this? Do I still keep talking about travel? Do I still keep posting about my life? Or is that selfish? Is that wrong? And she was kind of putting in a way of like, what do you think, to her audience? And this is something we've talked about as well. But what the comment I left was, because I've gone through this journey within the last few months or weeks, is that just because things are happening in the world that are bad or scary or frightening or uncertain doesn't mean that we as individuals should stop dreaming or stop living or stop enjoying life. And so I wholeheartedly believe that one of the ways we can make the world a better place is by continuing to dream and live and love and share and have joy. I truly believe that adds to, if you want to say, the positive energy in the world, which makes the world a better place. And along with this idea of parenting, that makes your family a better place. When your children see that you're not giving up on living and you're not giving up on enjoying life and you're not in depression because the world is falling apart, right? Then they see that and they feel that and they have that hope and they have that joy. And so they they keep feeling positive and feeling that there's hope and feeling that, they can still have a positive impact in the world. And then the other side of that is absolutely the most important thing I think we could ever do to make the world a better place is by making our family better. It still comes back to that. It comes back to the basics. It comes back to us being the best person that we can be, so that we're the best spouse that we can be, so we're the best parents that we can be, so we have the best family we can have, so that we have a better community, so that we then have a better world. It really is that simple, although it is complex. That is complex, but it's also very simple. So for me, yeah, there's a lot of great things we could do. We could, support refugees. We can donate money. We talked to a guy in Portugal who was, at the time, he was in Poland helping with the refugees,
And we went and visited a family, new friends of ours over there. And they, since we left, they have had a Ukrainian family move in with them.
Yeah.
A whole family, like in their place. And so, there's great things going on and we can participate in that, and we should.
All of that's great. But we also don't have to do that. Or if we don't have that opportunity to do that, that's okay too. Because we can focus on these basic things, and that's still going to make the world a better place. And I 110% believe that.
Now, it is sobering, but also empowering for me to think I can prevent a huge slew of problems in my children's lives by being a better parent. That's a reality. I can prevent so many future problems for my kids when they're adults by being a more competent parent now. And I see the opposite of that play out every week as I'm working with coaching clients. And these are happy, successful, great people. Even just this morning, right? There's major problems and difficulties in an adult life because of the way they're brought up by their parents. So I don't know. I love that idea. It just lights me up. Like, if I'm better, I'm going to prevent all kinds of unnecessary problems for my kids in the future.
Or at the very least, you're reducing the potential problems.
Yes. Yep.
Yeah.
And giving them tools that when they face problems, it's not a big deal. What could literally be a crisis becomes just a little obstacle, a little inconvenience. Effective parenting can turn a future crisis into an inconvenience.
And we're saying that with experience, because not only has that been the case for our own lives, our own adult lives, but we've had situations in our family that could have been potential huge crises. But I think because of the tools we have developed on our own, and we've developed as parents, and we've developed in our family culture, it's allowed our children to still keep moving forward and to thrive in spite of really difficult challenges. So this isn't just like theory, in theory, this could work well. This is what we've seen, and what we've seen work with people. And the beautiful thing about this is that really all you're doing in this process you're describing of becoming the best parent possible is, we keep mentioning this, but we're going to keep mentioning it. You're becoming the best person possible. You're just, and it might seem selfish, you're just focusing on you. You're focusing on making you better. And by doing that, you're becoming a better spouse and parent. So you're turning inward in order to turn outward, right? But you keep looking in, and you're saying, what's off? What's misaligned? What do I need to readjust and realign and address? What have I been ignoring? What am I not paying attention to? And when you do that, that's where the magic happens, right there.
Big time. Another way of saying that is the best thing you can do, we can do for our kids, is to be our best selves. The best thing you can do for your children is to make the most of yourself. And that is exciting and daunting. I can see it in your faces. But it's an opportunity, right? And a responsibility. I love it. Okay, here's a
You
comment
ready
here.
for this one?
I think it's probably also important to realize that even children of the quote nearly perfect parenting can still make poor choices. It's not necessarily a reflection of us as parents. This shouldn't be a cop-out, though. It's just helpful from a grace perspective. Yes, thanks, Amy. Yeah, even good people and good kids with good parents can still do stupid, right? It can happen. It can happen. But in our experience of working with all the families we work with, the more effective we are as parents, the less that does happen. But you're absolutely right. We need to have some grace there. It's not always a reflection.
Yes.
Life is complex. People are complex.
Every human brain is complex, and every human brain is different. So this is the fascinating thing about parenting, is because all of your children have different bodies and different brains, and they can all understand and comprehend and take in information in different ways and process it differently. And that can be,
or not at all,
or not, or
in some kids' cases, they're nothing.
Yeah. So, we've had that experience too, where we thought all the kids were picking up the same information, but they weren't necessarily processing it the same way. Yes.
Okay, so before we let you go, I want everyone to pick at least one thing you want to work on in the context of being a better
you.
Better you to be a better parent. Like, what do you want to focus on? And there's all positive focus here. What do you want to focus on? What do you want to work on? What's your thing moving forward to be a better model for your parent, for your parents and your kids? What's one thing you'd like to work on? And you can share it in the chat. You can jump on mic. What would you like to focus on moving forward in this context of like, let's make the world a better place by making our family a better place?
I'd say more experiences as a family. I know it sounds somewhat minor, but not really for us, especially because we've kind of been hermits the past 2 years, trying to figure out how to parent, what to do, how to do it with 2 little kids. And anyway, we went out last week and we did something simple that we didn't think was going to make much of a difference. We just went to this like little lake nearby, and we let the kids put their feet in the water, and they just loved it. It was like 30 minutes and that was it. And I don't know, it made everybody feel happier. So
Exactly.
we're making a plan to actually go out each weekend. So that's really hard for us because we like to stay in.
Yes, that's a perfect example.
That's perfect.
30 minutes of a simple activity and everyone's like, man, we all feel better. This is great. We can all do more of that.
And I know, speaking for myself, it's amazing to me how much internal resistance there always is to doing that. It's like every week I'm still like, we have to go out again, but we never regret it. When you do it, you're always glad. You're like, oh, I'm glad we did that. That was nice. Every time.
Right when we got back from our trip, we wanted to specifically go do some family activities where all of us were fully engaged to kind of, make some investments, since Rachel and I had been gone for almost 2 weeks. And the kids wanted to go to a trampoline park, right? One of those indoor epic trampoline centers. So we went, man, and it was all in mayhem, crazy awesomeness, and jousting, riding a bull. There were some injuries, but man, it was so fun. And it was, we had to throw down some money. Those places aren't cheap. And we were exhausted and I got hurt, but like we all walked out of there like, that was awesome. And it was this really cool memory we all had together, like coming back from our trip. And so it was I don't know, it was really special because Rachel and I had all these experiences away and then come back and cement it with something like kind of a wow factor memory and experience for all of us. And it was nearby here. It wasn't wasn't that big of a deal, but it really hit home. It was awesome. You want to read some of these?
Being more consistent with routines and systems.
Yes. Consistency is queen.
That's right. I'm working on being more assertive, especially as a mom of daughters. Yeah. That can be important. I learned that. My oldest daughter is a Black woman. I had to learn how to be more. Okay, she took a test one time. She was 100% extrovert. I took the same test. I was 100% introvert. Okay, we kind of clash a little bit on that. I did have to learn how to be a little more assertive with her because otherwise she's going to push me around. So I can understand that. You do have to, as your children grow up and become adults, you have to learn to be an adult with them. You're no longer just the mom giving instructions, you have to be an adult.
And
that requires more assertiveness often.
What's really cool, you guys, and those of you with older kids know this, when you do the parenting and the relationship thing right, the older kids maintain the relationship with you.
Yeah.
My older daughter texted me this morning and she was like, Dad, can I sign up for a coaching session with you? I want a legit coaching session for life. I was like, yes, right? Big win. She still wants to get coaching, right? And it's a really beautiful thing to keep that relationship moving forward.
I need to stay calm and positive when my kids get sick. My dad was in the hospital as a child and I panic when they get sick. My kids now lie to cover illness, knowing I'll turtle if I know the truth. Yeah.
Ooh, good insight.
Really good insight. Yep.
Well, see that? There it is. There's that generational thing. So profound.
Well, and the fascinating thing about a situation like this is that what happens is we're projecting our own fears and worries onto our child. And we end up getting in the way of their own personal awareness. So instead of them being in tune with their illness and the severity of it and being able to be honest with themselves and with others at where they're at, they feel a need to cover it up. And so it keeps this awareness from being in place. I know I've had to do this with my kids and their, what should I say? Risk-taking and escapades. I've had to hold back my own feelings about their risks because I don't know their capabilities. Only they know that. And so if I project my fears onto them, it gets in the way of them truly understanding what their capabilities are and actually leads to more risk because they're not in tune with their body and whether or not they're capable of taking this risk. They're paying attention to whether or not mom feels it's safe for me to take this risk, which then puts more danger in the situation. So we have to learn sometimes as parents to get out of the way and say, you're a person, you got to figure it out. Now that it's good, I'm not saying there shouldn't be any guidance here because guidance is good. And he's always been the one.
That's
my
been
role. Your
role
role with risk taking, to be the guide, because he has more experience with that. And he's able to coach them and say, make sure you do this, pay attention to this, like don't do this, like look for the rocks, that type of stuff. So they can actually take safe risks instead of me saying, no, I don't think you should do that. It's dangerous.
That's scary. It's dangerous. Right. And she's done so well at letting me lead and teach and not preventing or introducing fear. Yeah. So you should see it. You should see our kids now. In fact, in the trampoline park, like our 18-year-old, the whole gym was watching him like,
he was like Spider-Man.
Are you Spider-Man? I mean, this kid's doing double backflips and fulls and flying. I mean, it's wild, right? And that they're all doing in gymnastics or silks or stunts or whatever it is. They're doing crazy cool stuff because we've allowed that to move forward.
And sometimes that meant I walk away or I turn my back so I don't have to watch what's going on. But yeah, sometimes we have to get out of the way. We use a trampoline park in our area for homeschool. They jump and then do work and then jump again. They have a great
Nice.
yearly membership package. Fun.
Wow.
Yeah, that's awesome. And then finally have better habits and be more productive and lively every day. Yeah, if we want our kids to have good habits, we need to have good habits. If we want our kids to be lively, we need to be lively, right? We have to show more emotion sometimes. That's something I've had to learn to do.
That's right.
Yeah.
And I think I've told you this before in this group. I had this wonderful coaching client, and one day we were having a session, and she said, I asked her, I said, are you happy? Are you genuinely happy? And she's like, yeah, sincerely, I'm a happy person. I said, do your children know that? Is it obvious? And she realized that it wasn't. She didn't express her happiness. She didn't show her happiness. She just was quietly happy. And so her kids, and as we worked through this over the weeks and months, she realized her kids thought she was miserable or they didn't know what to think. Like, mom's a robot or numb, or she's just enduring. And kids and people will jump to these conclusions. They'll just assume whatever. If you're not obvious about what you're feeling, they're just going to be like, oh, maybe she hates me. Maybe she's mad. Maybe she's resentful. Oh, I'm not the favorite child. Oh, and they're coming up with all this stuff while you're just like doing you. Right? So yeah, be what you want them to be.
Or at least what you want them to know about you.
Yep.
They may not end up being that way, but at least they know you are that way because you express it. And we have to be intentional about that. I guess that's the point, because we assume our kids will just pick up on it, and they won't.
They won't.
I think maybe I've shared this before about my own grandmother. When she passed away, she told my mom right before she died, basically, that she said, I always thought all I needed to do was be a good person, and that would be enough for her kids. And at the time, right before she passed away, there was a major sibling rivalry going on where she was going to live and who was going to take care of her and all this stuff. And it got kind of ugly.
It was an ugly fight.
And, that was how she went out of life. And she felt really bad about it and said, I thought all I needed to do was be a good person, and that would be enough. And that's not saying that she failed, but it really stood out to me because I don't believe it is enough. I think we have to be more vocal about it. We have to be more intentional about it. We have to show what it is we mean or we think or we feel. Because if we don't, most people just jump to conclusions. They come up with their own assumptions. And they think you feel or believe certain things based on this silent movie they're watching of you, not really knowing how it is you really think or feel. And that's hard. It's a lot harder to do that. But I think the long-term results of that are better, because we are sharing the journey we're on with our kids so that they know life is this journey and they have more of an idea of what to expect.
Okay, love it. Thanks, you guys. This is awesome. The more I think about this, the more I talk about it, I sincerely believe most of the world's problems are either caused by or could be prevented, are caused by incompetent parenting, and could really be prevented or improved with competent parenting. It starts in our homes and ultimately starts with us, which is exciting. What a beautiful opportunity. So let's lean into that and just pick one thing. Don't get overwhelmed by it, but pick one thing.
It's not a sprint, it's a marathon. So
I think it's a sprinting marathon. I'll
That's
be the
you.
sprint, Rachel will be the marathon.
Yeah.
And you just pick your spot wherever you're at and say, okay, what's next? Right? What was passed down to me? I had to do this a ton. What was passed down to me that there's no way on heaven or earth I'm passing that on to my kids? Like, be the stop in that generational change. Or you might have to say, man, none of my family line ever did that. I'm going to be the start. We're going to start this in our family because I want this passed on to my kids and grandkids and great grandkids. And you be that catalyst. Just be really deliberate about, okay, what is it we want? Let's make that happen. Okay, love you guys. Thanks for being here. Thanks for being awesome parents and great people. Have a great trip. Enjoy Costa Rica.
You can tell she's
I know.
driving in Costa
Yeah,
Rica.
you're like, yes, they're gonna be crossing rivers and oh, we can't hear the audio for some reason. Oh no. We can tell you're on some awesome road going somewhere cool. We know those roads. Oh, that's awesome. Okay. Love you guys. Reach upward.